So when you think about American power on the world stage, what's the first thing that pops into your head? I'm going to guess it's something like aircraft carriers, right? Maybe stealth bombers. But what if I told you the real story of American dominance isn't about its military, but about its money? That's the really interesting idea we're going to dig into.
That really brings up a huge question for our time. What does it even mean to be powerful today? Is it still just about having the biggest army and winning wars? Or is there something else going on, something a little more invisible? That question is going to be our guide through all of this.
Well, the usual answer is, of course, military strength. And, just look at the numbers. They're absolutely wild. The United States spends more on its military than the next 10 countries combined. Let that sink in. That paints a picture of this unstoppable military force, right? That's the kind of power we all recognize.
But here's where it gets really interesting. For all that spending, all that firepower, the U.S. hasn't had a clean, decisive victory in a major war since 1945. So what's going on here? If all that military muscle doesn't guarantee a win, then what's it even for? What kind of power are we really talking about?
Okay, that leads us right into our first section, the power paradox. The question isn't, is America powerful? Of course it is. The real question is, how is it powerful? Because it's a kind of power that doesn't conquer territory. It shapes the whole world in a totally different way. So how do we get our heads around this paradox? Well, to do that, we have to look back, way back. That's our second section, building a system. Because the blueprint for American power today was drawn up right after World War II.
All right, I want you to picture the world in 1945. Europe is in ruins, Asia is devastated, but the United States, it's basically untouched by the fighting, and its economy is just booming. It controlled almost half of the entire world's GDP. That's just staggering. It was this unique, once-in-a-lifetime chance to rewrite the rules for the whole planet, and America didn't waste any time. And this moment led to a totally new kind of strategy. This wasn't going to be your typical empire building. The key to the whole thing, the real genius of it, is captured perfectly in this one line. Instead of building colonies, it built institutions. And just think about what that means. We're talking about the United Nations, the World Bank, the IMF, NATO. None of those look like colonies, right? But what they did was maybe even more powerful. They basically wrote the rule book for the whole global game. The rules for money, for trade, for security, and, well, when you write the rules, you tend to write them in a way that helps you win. All right, so if this new system is the power structure, what's the actual engine that makes it all run? That's what we're getting into in Section 3, America's Real Weapon. And here's a hint, you might have some of it in your wallet right now. Yep, the single most powerful tool the U.S. has isn't a bomber or a missile, it's the U.S. dollar. Because it's the world's main reserve currency, it's basically the bedrock of the entire global economy. And that's not just some fancy title, it's a real mechanism for wielding incredible and often totally invisible power.
So how does that actually work in practice? Well, it's kind of built on three main pillars. First, big, important things like oil are bought and sold in dollars. So if you're a country that needs oil, you need dollars. Simple as that. Second, most international loans are in dollars. And third, pretty much every central bank in the world keeps a big pile of dollars as its emergency savings. All of that together creates this massive, never-ending global demand for dollars. And that is what allows the U.S. to borrow incredible amounts of money, and you guessed it, pay for that giant military we talked about.
And you can see this power in action. Here's a perfect example. The U.S. Federal Reserve, just a group of people in Washington, D.C., decides to raise interest rates. Boom. That one decision sends a shockwave through the entire world. Money starts pouring out of other countries and rushing back to the U.S. to get those higher returns. Suddenly, other countries' currencies get weaker and their economies can get shaky. Not a single shot was fired, but the impact can be just as devastating as a military strike.
Which brings us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? Back to all those troops and aircraft carriers. If the dollar is the real weapon, then what's the point of the military? Well, that's our final section, the system's guardian. And it turns out its job isn't quite what we think it is.
Okay, get this number in your head. The U.S. has over 700 military bases, spread out across more than 80 countries. Now, that's not the layout for an army of conquest. That's a network. It's designed for global reach, for protection. But the big question is, what is it protected? And here it is. This is the final piece of the whole puzzle. The number one job of that massive military isn't to conquer new lands. It's to be the security guard for the entire global system that America built. It's there to protect shipping lanes, to make sure key allies are stable, and, most importantly, to protect the dollar-based financial system. That system is the real source of American power.
So, after all of that, we're left with one massive final question. If America's true power really comes from the dollar, what happens if the rest of the world just stops using it? Think about that. The answer to that one question might just tell us everything about who holds power in the decades to come.